It was funny. One listener recently sent me a message, said, "Could you please limit the number of times that you say polished chrome torpedo?" Because every time I hear it, I'm just bringing the coffee like into my mouth, and then I snort, laugh, and go into a choking fit, and it splatters all over my screen and keyboard and everything else, or my dash of my vehicle, because it's just so unbelievably canny. And you have to realize these are some type of mix. It's a mix of marketers. Like, just think rogue marketers, like search engine optimization people, sort of shady. Oh, used car salesman. That used to be a one. Like, just somebody who will try to persuade you on bad topics. So these people, my guess is, they've been recruited. Of course, not from some direct state actor, but by some shells in between to sound pretty non-threatening. And they get their mandate: sell the tiny boats, for example, to the English public. And there's a lot of them. There's like 10 different kinds of them on YouTube, for example. And they'll have a clickbait title which says like send them all, tow them all back to France or something like that. So you think, okay, this is probably a call-in show where somebody's gonna make just belt out some obvious solution. But no, it's one of the 50 takes. They had callers call in. They don't air the 49 takes where this guy gets his butt handed to him, but they have like a sophist rhetorician, somebody who's real good with their mouth, and their mandate, which is to sell the public on this. And so they'll slice and dice and slice and dice and slice and dice to find some way of presenting it that doesn't make it look like the total lawless, irregular invasion that it is. And then, oh, how this, a fake caller then comes in. So he halfway slices and dices it with one guy from, a steam pipe fitter from Manchester. But then the next caller has sort of a slightly off accent. It's from some, like a regional dialect, so you wouldn't suspect it of being like a Tokyo Rose. And then she comes in, well, here's that man from Manchester complaining that people are coming here, getting benefits and all of that. But what about 100 years ago, and when the English did that to other countries? So she comes with the historical or alternative reality propaganda. Just then he lets then that be the final point, and then that's the end of the clip. Maybe it's 5 minutes, like a 5 minute blurb. So not real all that much, but enough to keep whoever is subscribed to that channel. It give them some talking points against people looking for simple, effective solutions to a cockamamie problem. So, and again, there's like at least, I would say, just think of them as used car salesmen. And they're not going to come out with something you don't want to hear in the beginning. They're going to pretend to address your issue. And then maybe 50% in or 90% in, then they're going to come in with a reversal. Some rhetorical sophist, bullying type of jargonistic tactic to trump you, to defeat you in the public debate, like that type of gamemanship also. So you have to think, is this person getting paid six figures, yes or no? And are they higher or middle range six figures? That would motivate a used car salesman to take a couple of talking points and try to sell it, especially if they're amoral or up against it, or they think that their pitter patter is good enough, and they actually get maybe a slight thrill about being seemingly in the center of controversies, having a little bit of attention. And that mid six-figure income does really go a long way to thinking that they're pretty up on their game, because as a online marketer or something else, or who knows how these guys had to slide through this decrepit system, they feel like they've succeeded on some level. And they really don't like the people that didn't take the shabby deal that they took, right? The dodgy deal that the other side tried to make less dodgy for them, but actually is dodgy as hell. They don't like people who don't take that deal because they're not professionals, according to them. They're ranting about barbarians, uncouth, authentic people that should be canceled because they make them look bad, and they like to earn a living and not a bad one. So why don't the people that don't like them go away because they've got the limelight. They got the corporate stamp of approval. And they got a little network, little studio, little camera people, little script writers, little editors, slicers and dicers. Got a whole production crew behind them. Operating budget. And they also seem to know how to game the algorithm so that their crap, again, blocks out any, authentic views, at least in the UK information space. So isn't that an oddity? So who are the people like that the algo has put at like the 100th or not even listed on the algo that you can't find, that has really insightful cutting commentary that cuts through the BS? Well, you're not going to find that person passively if you're just scrolling your phone. That person might as well not exist. But their stuff, their 20 top spots on a daily occurrence, just seems like they just sat down and decided to belt out this highly sophisticated, manipulative drivel that seems convincing, because sort of, oh my goodness, could it be a white monkey job? White monkey jobs for the white monkeys in their native country that should have a better grip on politics, but apparently don't, because there's an army of white monkeys that are working against them that aren't as obvious as the ones that they use in their domestic information spaces. Like, you should look like bloopers, white monkey bloopers, like what these type of, also again, dodgy dudes in China, what the hell were they doing there and why? People that stay there, they're famously dodgy. Some of them are escaping a sentence somewhere, and then they got a grudge against the place they came from, so they don't have any problems bad mouthing where they came from, and it's almost like a magic wand to tap them on the head. Now they got money. They got a bunch of prostitutes, and they got a lot of praise from their new paymasters. So, but the English equivalent, it's really pretty creepy, and the intellectuals, how they keep the working class, how they're interacting with them. I'm willing to bet this one dude with his fake call-in show, he probably took, again, 50 takes, where he got his butt handed to him 48 times. That doesn't make the channel. The 2 times where he tricked somebody, that again, those are the times that's the take for that day. So really sad. Also, I heard COVID-19 in London was bad. They said it was authoritarian. And it was authoritarian to the point of totalitarianism, which meant cancellation of civil liberties and then not really explaining or leading or using persuasive arguments with the population and making compassionate or reasonable compromises. It was just, no, top down, do this. If you don't do that, you get punished. So that, again, the scales fell for many people's eyes, but of course, how far do you want to take that? Do you want to take it into a full-blown conspiracy theory and just go off the rails? That's not advisable either. Now, if you bring it back down to it was just a racket, then you understand things pretty on a human level. And this is what happens if there's either a socio-political or economic takeover in some way, or there's a reinforcing of positions in those three areas simultaneously in an organized way. So that's what we're talking about. But of course, just seeing it like the Tokyo roads, like if you're not prepared to be in a state of war, and then you think you're looking at just normal viewing entertainment, then you're not in the right frame of mind to see these imposters for what they are. But what's really cool is to switch from these type of white monkey imposters to RT, and then see if there's congruence on the narratives, because sometimes there are. Like even if it's just one, it is one of their narratives. And so once you see that, then you see basically the whole ruse for what it is, and their backers can be classified as being an essential part of that ruse. And then the directors of that ruse. And then you can also think a little bit ahead, what would be the results of such a ruse, do you think? Good results or bad results, yes or no? So, but on the other hand, using propaganda, they want you to think it's hopeless to resistance is futile, but it really isn't. Every grain of sand is meaningful. If you've got 20% resistance, it's not great, but it's better than nothing. You got 40, 50, 100%. That's great, but again, sometimes you can overestimate your resistance. You might be resistant to 99 things. They're going to try to hit you on the one you're not. Like your heartstrings, sad stories. Boy, that really wins over the rubes, doesn't it? Got a sad story, like the beggar who has both legs, but he's kneeling in a way it looks like he's wearing special pants, makes it looks like he's got no legs. That's the type of flim-flammers you're dealing with. 5% of the population at any given moment in time, but especially in times of immense moral and social decay, you're going to have flim-flammers. And normally they're on the fringes, but if you've got a geopolitical actor in play, they'll put them in a nice setup and just tell them what to do, and they'll do it. 5%, of course. Or let's say lower, even 1%. They don't need many. If you get a dump like New York City at 15 million people, all under sadistic economic conditions, how many will roll? Just use your own judgment or your knowledge of the people you've met in your life up until this time. Now, again, if you're 20, you're probably not qualified to answer this question. If you're 40 or 60, you're getting closer to an comprehensive understanding of population dynamics, distribution, statistics, and proclivities. Then we can talk. Oh, you're going to tell me these people don't exist, is that right? Where have you been living? What bowling alley have you been going to? Like, I'd like to know exactly where you live and how, because you could be a hayseed, which is okay. There are lots of hayseeds out there. You're telling me you're coming from a big city, a world capital, something like that, something a little bit bigger than Boise, Idaho. I'm going to probably and rightfully so immediately classify you as an imposter. or some type of useless person, like that is bright-sided and blarnified. So, and I don't know if that's okay or not. I think the people you're trying to communicate with, you're first off, you're wasting their time. Whether you're wasting your time or not, I guess that doesn't matter because it's not very valuable to begin with. But, you know, narcissists, they think it's more valuable than anybody else's. So that's why, again, they think their imposterism is worth a go. They don't see any downsides for themselves. It's all, you know, something that they get something out of it. So what do they care if they're wasting your time? They're getting paid to waste your time. Is it a problem for you? Well, that's your problem. They have a very myopic and strange take on things. And they, again, have a lot of rationalizations for why they think what they do is not only without consequence, or if it has consequence, it's positive consequence for them specifically. But they don't acknowledge the downsides, and they think, oh, you're over exaggerating. What does it matter, right? Words, words, words. What does it matter? I get paid to mislead people and take positions that are strange. I represent foreign interests. They don't see a disconnect there. So, but yeah, UK in a bad way, as of today. It is, and not just today. I think the last 13 years have probably been the worst in all of the history of the United Kingdom. And that's saying a lot. And it doesn't look like there's going to be a turnaround, but if we think of this again in the context to the lead up to a world war, then, you know, we'll see that there's been a lot of bad outsets that didn't necessarily lead to bad outcomes ultimately. Because if people do expose their hand, they say, hey, guess what? Hello, here I am. I'm not working with you. I'm working against you. Then people can make rational decisions for themselves. Not rationalizing decisions, but really, truly reasonable decisions for themselves. Like, okay, we got missiles flying. Maybe I will put up 3 air defense units in this position because that's where they're coming from. Oh, wow, 10 less missile strikes. 10 less polished chrome torpedoes. In this time of imposterism, it's very important to realize that the news networks, most likely in your country, are owned most likely by criminally affiliated rackets. Now, that's a big claim, I realize that. And you might say, no, that's not happening in my country. But let me just tell you, it's happened and is happening in other countries. Countries you wouldn't suspect. You know, European countries. Like, for example, I just throwing this out there. Italy, Germany, France. Russia. You know, I'm just going to call Russia Eastern Europe because the state doesn't exist anymore. They're running off fumes of Leninism, which was a usurpation of the democratic process. And now they have some type of old Eastern philosophy. You could think of it as maybe some type of khanate. Like there was the Crimean Khanate, now there's a Eastern European or Muscovy Khanate. That's probably a better way of thinking of it. Because again, Putin is just the front man. Everything behind that, they call this, what do they call it? They're like experts call it something, what is it? Oh, Kremlinology. It's a complete science unto itself and nobody knows what's going on. Churchill said it's like dogs, like pit bulls fighting underneath a carpet. You can't really see what the pit bulls are. You just see the bones getting thrown out from the sides. So, which is to say that after Lenin, after Stalin, the further it fell into organized crime, because more or less it was politicians that wouldn't put themselves up for election. So they would pass off positions to people they knew, and then of course people could buy into it. And of course there were certain rules. You could certainly, if you crossed other thieves, you could come into problems, but it was all about keeping up appearances, having parades, putting on the uniforms, self-congratulatory, alternative reality narratives. And then, of course, trying to push the franchise, because, of course, you can only steal so much within the biggest country on the planet before other thieves start asking, hey, well, where can I get some stuff? And so they came up with the idea, okay, sure, we got embassies all around the world, so why don't we send some embassy staff? You can go figure out some business models, like in places like Mali. Or other, you send people in, what's going on, who are the big wigs, what's the political situation, who doesn't like who is open to this or that suggestion. And then all of a sudden, green men show up. Of course, no badges, no identification, no explanation, no nothing. All of a sudden, there's a coordinated effort to do something that benefits their network. Now you say, oh, this was a national network, but I think it's better to just see it as a criminal network. Now, you could use the word terrorism, but that word is pretty ridiculous. But certainly it is a form of terrorism. Whatever you understand under terrorism, certainly fits. But organized criminality is probably a less hysterical term, and yet the effects of organized crime are a lot worse than you probably think. See, we've had all these stupid Hollywood movies about mobsters and whatnot, making them sort of understandable people. But ultimately, their self-serving criminal practices really do a lot of damage. So it's an infantile, narcissistic point of view that, of course, is all over in prison. You go to prison, you ask a prisoner, what are you in for? Well, yeah, I murdered my grandmother. Well, why? Well, she didn't bring me the Fruit Loops fast enough. That's the organized crime boss mentality. Just pure impunity, and it was good for me in the moment. Now, of course, some of these idiots, like one day later, oh, I wish I didn't do that, but a lot of them don't get caught. And they rack up a bunch of crimes before they get sent straight into the fiery pits. And of course, because when you do bad things happen to you. They experience all different types of bad things in life, but it really doesn't matter. We don't need to humanize stupidity like has been done in postmodern times. So, but again, criminal organizations, yeah, you know what criminals like to do? They like to profit. And they like when other people pay for it. But if that calculus flips on them and they start experiencing a lot of bad things based on their actions, then they don't like the people that told them to do things that ended up putting them in a bad position. So there's really a stretch to how far their loyalty will go. Which is to say, they're not the most reliable people in the world. And yet that's also something they use to their advantage because, you got a cop on a beat. He's getting paid his salary. They make him a proposal, feed him information, and all of a sudden, they got information. Now, will they act on that information or not? Well, most street goons and local outfits will not. What do they need the information for? But they might sell it to a bigger outfit. And then it gets up to a bigger outfit, and then that bigger outfit might turn out to be a warlike state actor. And then so warlike state actor actions start happening like orchestrated amphibious landings and widespread use of information operations to sell the populace on being invaded. Just imagine you're a public relations company, and you need to think of public relations like lawyers. You get a corrupt, amoral, nihilistic lawyer that just is all about the cash and money. They'll represent anybody. So you need to think of public relations like that. Oh, okay, so here's the proposal. You're going to send all of these people that you human traffic into these areas, let's say a country you don't like or you want to disrupt or destabilize. And we need to present that to the public in such a way that is somehow palatable. So that maybe not they don't like it, but at least there's every reason given why these people should not be stopped from invading the country. And then imagine they pay not just one company but two, and then they have them working together with compromised news networks from the standpoint of ownership and management. Don't think it can happen. It's been happening since 2014. So again, we're 10 years into this type of operation, and they just keep ramping it up. Like first to start off as a trickle, oh, this isn't really happening. Let's get Greenpeace in on one of these photo ops. Let's get NGOs doing this, doing that. Just keep all the balls in the juggling all the balls in the air to beguile the public. This is another thing. Just because the public knows something doesn't mean the public's going to react. And if the leadership is phony baloney, then nothing happens anyway. Oh, it's lacking the political will is how they put it in euphemistic terms. It means they don't do anything when there's an emergency. They don't take appropriate action. There's a fire extinguisher, there's a fire, but they're lacking the will to go to the fire extinguisher and put out the fire. That's lack of political will in a nutshell. Why is that acceptable? Well, it's not. But instead of the free press putting people that lack political will in political positions that they usurped, they cover for them. They give them every reasonable doubt to not question their high and noble principles that don't exist, but they've created on the basis of their inaction. So, fires, they have a right to exist. And if the fire happened, there was a reason for it. And maybe the thing should just burn, and it's just there in this corner, so it's not really endangering the entire building. And, someone like that, imagine that you have a group of people, like, why aren't they doing anything? And then you have this explainer, again, a chrome torpedo, I like to call them that. Look, this isn't really dangerous. Just go about your business. I'm sure they'll get around to extinguishing this fire eventually. Maybe next week, but maybe in an hour. We don't know. So just go back. Those types of people, explainers, like Walmart greeters. They're explainers. Now, again, the criminal mindset is very myopic. Just think of like some dirty, stupid provincial town where a lot of these dumb, parasitic gangsters come from, where their mentality is shaped. Uh, they don't care about your backyard. Like, they don't care if the trash gets dumped on your side of the city. That's how small their type of thinking is. So if a geopolitical actor who has, let's say, bigger aims, they'll just use these very myopic people that, again, are working for their own pocket to be a part of a more comprehensive, complex operation. And of course, they don't, what they don't see, they don't care. They don't. They're passing the whole responsibility of the thing to others, and they're just enriching themselves in the meantime. So when all of these operations, like, I think it is going to come to a head at some point. But of course, we need to look at the lead up, the 10-year lead up to this fiasco, and we also need to uh, identify, categorize, and also bring to justice all the people that profited by these operations. So that means people that were holding responsible office, and then of course the information sphere. None of these people are going to get off. All the ownership people, especially managers, and the people, the faces that spewed out misinformation and public relations on national security, international security issues that turned out to be dead wrong. Again, minimum 5 to 10 years in prison. That's it. I mean, that's about, that would be a lenient sentence. Depending on the severity of it, it can go up to life in prison. Like ownership, I would say life in prison. Any type of lawyers involved, any type of consultants, even accountants that work with them, potential life sentences. And here's the thing: it's not just one country. Now, at this time, we can say with a surety that France, Germany, and Italy are the three worst culprits at this point. But certainly Spain, Portugal, any of the Balkan countries, Hungary is an absolute radioactive disaster. Turks, disaster. And then, of course, Scandinavian countries and these funky monkeys that come out being softballs on issues that there should only be hardballs on. Uh, they might get a year or two in prison just on the basis of being in the vicinity of these misinformation operations. So just keep that in mind. Again, they're clapping and cheering themselves on right now. This is the year 2023. But in 5 years' time, 2 years' time, 1 year time, the whole thing could flip real quick. So don't forget these people, these facilitators, and I might say profit takers. Because they, just imagine that, while everybody else got screwed, these people were profiting. So I would say they're either extremely dense or they're psychopathic on some level. Like they just don't feel any responsibility for others. Not their kinsmen, not their history, not their countrymen, nothing. Pure individuals, pure chrome torpedoes. So do realize that's going to be a factor. But again, to understand the nature of the problem, think of it more in terms of organized crime. And organized crime does not have borders. So it is a comprehensive effort, and crime needs to be taken more seriously. Anybody that's involved in organized crime should be considered an actor of a foreign government. You need to update your identification and also comprehensive understanding of what's actually going on. There are a lot of pieces moving at once. That's intentional. But you break it down piece by piece, it all fits together, and all of it is bad. It's a organized, armed campaign using multiple areas, coming from multiple areas. But your TV stations, I would say, have, let's say, an 80% probability of being over 50% compromised. The cultural war operations are something that were carried out over decades in Eastern Europe under the Soviet Union. Also, countercultural operations in the further west. And then you have to think of the collusion between the organized crime and Leninist. And then you have the Russian connection, which is not Russia, it's an Asiatic khanate. That's the way to think of it, like a godless one. I don't think the Attila the Hun, I mean, they speculate that he had different, step type religious understandings. It was like a mixture, a mixed bag. So, and you also have to think that the Attila the Hun was very prevalent in Central Asia. See, we moderns, we like to forget they even existed because we got big into seafaring, so we could avoid the Silk Road that was total, and all of the cities in the entire area. Basically, the Ukraine of its day was completely destroyed and occupied by their Khanate. So they're not stupid. They're pretty maniacal. Really, that's what gives them a leg up. They're willing to do the criminal deed that the good person wouldn't. And then they're also willing to misrepresent themselves to good people to do dastardly deeds. So, but you can spot them. But it's really hard for good people to get these types of exterminationist motives, to understand them, because they're so foreign from their own programming to a large degree. Also, I have to say this, a lot of young people have been injected with exterminationist programming, which means they feel they're bad and that it's best if they just like disappear and die. This is what, if an enemy can get that type of cultural programming amongst your culture while pretending it's your culture by having white monkeys do it, insiders do it, even not white monkeys, just people that have the polished accent because they went to polished schools and learned all the polished things, and they use all of those things as tools and weapons against the people who were generous enough to allow them access to a system, like allowing bank robbers into a bank. It shouldn't be surprising that they would want to rob it, but when you have well-meaning people dealing with geopolitical aspects that are way outside their league, oh, these people have money, they just want to send their kids here, that's it. And you have some dummy that is allowed to make those types of decisions, or maybe it's someone who's on their side and not a dummy. And so the cultural infrastructure gets taken over, and those were traditionally the institutions that would be able to detect the threat and to eliminate it. You take out the radar, they can fly right in, do whatever they want, hit whatever they want, and then also maintain whatever they want. And if they have to slide money from one area to another, they'll do it for strategic reasons. So how things have gotten this bad this fast is pretty understandable once you realize the confluence of factors in play. That does not mean it's ultimately going to be successful. Genghis Khan is as terrible as that time and even centuries were. He didn't pull it off in the end. because they have a lot of infighting. They're not as unified. They can make bold, dastardly strategic moves like that, but they can't necessarily maintain it over time. Now, it's also a wrong thing to underestimate the time. Baghdad, they underestimated. How about this? They sacked Baghdad. They built an invasion fleet and almost invaded Japan. It was only a storm that prevented that. Just like the Spanish Armada being decimated by a storm. It's in Japanese legends. It's famous. But then you have to think, they're launching from places like Korea or Vladivostok. How far did they have to go? How many heads did they have to chop to get there? So, but this is also something you should consider, is that they use native populations they use it like Canon 5. They don't care. They'll decapitate the leadership, then they're the leadership, then they tell them their neighbors or their landsmen that were able to retreat to a place of safety, that they're the enemies. They're God's enemies. In the case of the Janissaries, they were God's enemies. And the Janissaries, again, they lived sort of a privileged position. They were not. They were also security, and the security worked for a couple of hundred years until it didn't. But those couple of hundred years were a hell of a time for well-meaning people in Europe. And the steppe, Indo-Germanic tribes all the way down through India. Because that's where they were. Oh, let's not forget the fall of India. The fall of India should be reconsidered in the light of modern operations, because they're involved as well. It's multipolar. That's the way you need to think of it. The type of arguments they have has appeal to certain disgruntled groups. For example, the sterile group. They don't care. They're not invested. It's a clear sign of nihilism. They're when they're dead, that's it. No kids. They have nothing to worry about. Oh, also other people don't care about them. But if they can splash out on whatever they want to buy and go wherever they want to go, they're in on that plan. They have no qualms about doing or saying anything to stay within those ranks. So the other sterile groups should be very easy to recognize because they've organized them into AstroTurf. But again, their psychology is already predisposed to be hateful against the majority of well-meaning, well-functioning, well-thinking, well-living population, which would be the majority of anyone's countrymen at any one given time, if we're not being attacked by all of these passive aggressive measures. So, but then there was a comment. It came so fast and so widespread. Well, they used modern technology to do it. So before they would have had to it would have been newspapers or one newspaper or one magazine or something like that. Now it's like everybody's on their phone. They put it on their phones. They've got videos. Videos are more persuasive. Then they have all of their psychological labyrinth type of correlation of reasonings. Oh, your culture is bad, and this is the new way, right? That was the old way, and they do it a very high tech, convincing, misleading way, using influencers or you name it. So you want to be in the in group, and the in group is exterminating itself and also persecuting the working class, the real cultural people. And you say, oh no, this can't happen. Again, go back to Eastern Europe. This is essentially what was going on. People in the West did not learn about that part. Really, we didn't learn a lot. We learned there was a military threat. We did not learn about the cultural threat. And that's because we already had Leninist in the information sphere at that time, suppressing that information, poo-pooing it, still believing in still pushing the utopian narrative of the Soviet Union. Can you believe that? And these people were tolerated in universities on the West Coast, like California. It had absolutely nothing to do with that nonsense. It was like the total opposite. A meritocracy versus their slave plantation run by criminals of no morals whatsoever, like sadistic torturers and betrayers. Foreign also, don't buy that Russian veneer. You know, when they kicked out the Tsar, that was it. So let that culture and that look die. Put it in a museum where it belongs. That they don't have any claim to that. Just because they stole it, they don't have any claim to that greatness. Nothing. And again, the utopianistic propaganda that they put out is just a pure fabrication. It's paper mache. That's it. So, yeah, cultures can die. Look at the pyramids. Do the pyramids belong to the people in the Ottoman caravan leftovers that took over Cairo in the Middle Ages? Is that how we want to do it? Like, oh, of course, there's a one-to-one equivalency between the pharaohs of Egypt and what is now there. No, of course not. So confine it to archaeology. They have nothing to do with it. They're just hiding behind it. Again, it's a mask. So imagine some hideous, horrible, terrible person plastering on like a silicone mask that looks like, a czar or something like that. Because they have the proxies. They'll do again it's a white monkey proxy. They got the white monkey proxy, and then behind that is where they are sitting. And this is a khanate way of doing things. See, West does not understand that. Many Westerners don't. They don't know anything about that history. It's not publicized. It's not very well known at this time. But it is how they rule. And see, the thing is, if you don't know them, if you're not in their circle, they're not sharing information. See, they're not an open and free society. It's hierarchical. It's a pyramid. So you're not privy to their decisions or the people making the decisions, which again comes to this whole concept of Kremlinology. That's the point. It's a measure they take as to not be hit, like they're hitting the people in open societies without them realizing it. It's just through proxies. So, and again, the concept of proxies, again, a lot of people would say, oh, it's this particular ethnic group that's their proxy. But it's a bunch of them all at once. It's multipolar. So that's why it really does. And then, of course, it's coming from untraditional areas. Like, for example, everyone hears the word Germany and thinks, oh, yeah, of course, Germany. Well, Germany, it was divided. Half of it was behind the Iron Curtain, and they conducted all types of inhumane, monstrous experiments. And so the victims of that, their brains are fried. But they do understand themselves to be Germans, but they're actually not. Their guts have been ripped out and put back. They're torpedoes in a lot of instances. And so this is the other thing. They had a society built on compliance, which was ideological compliance, which was to say an artificial means of measuring people as far as their compliance goes. So we say today is Red Hat Day. Who's not wearing a red hat? That's the problem. And then they removed this people. They treated them like third-class citizens. Enemies of the state. There you go. That's how they do it. So wokeism is the new iteration of that. and it's in a globalized context. So they got global operations. Uh, so they got a globalized method, ideology for that. See, in Czechoslovakia, it was Czech nationalism that they used as the vehicle for ideological operations. But now they're in the Sahel, they're in a France that's been compromised, they're in an Italy that's wrecked, they're in the Balkans, so they just come up with one ideology, woke, and just apply it all over the place. So same wokeness in the USA. It's like anti-Western ideological conformity. So but presented as the conformity for the West. So it's exterminationist. You see, you only get to live if you are against the West. So you're essentially a janissary in their mind. But if you're not, if you don't like prove it by like shooting a prisoner of war that you're in a prison with, and you're not, you're just as bad as they are. You see, that's the psychology behind it. So this means that in untraditionally military fields such as psychology, social sciences, politics, journalism, in general, the humanities have been invaded and occupied by these malignant forces. And so you would think, but again, the propaganda, the difference is the propaganda is they still keep the free and fair propaganda going. Yeah, we're free and fair. Yeah, we believe in meritocracy, all that. Yeah, sure. And then they implement these policies anyway. So it's deliberately confusing. And it's deliberately confusing because they don't really care how many people don't get it. Like the more people that don't get it, the better. They're not looking to conserve human resources from systems that they believe have traditionally been their enemies and have done things to them that they keep focusing on, even if it is alternative reality propaganda. So look how irreconcilable those two systems are. It really is a life or death struggle. And there's really no nobility in just letting yourself be rolled over by horrible people. But of course that can happen, out of controlness in this world. It was your house, right? That the missile hit, or maybe not, Like sometimes you can get lucky, you can get unlucky in life and times. Living in Ukraine in 1941 was not a good time, period. And it wasn't going to be getting better. But living in Ukraine in like the year 2000, 2001, something like that, 2002, 2010, 2005, things were looking up, man. There's a lot of people had a lot of good times. There was a whole optimistic feeling in the country that they could do anything, and they were really doing it. It was becoming something super successful. Well, guess what that creates? That creates envy in the world. People who think that they deserve to have all the good things and do all the good things and whatnot, they become envious. Especially barbarians of the East. They want to have the thing. They can't be the thing. So they're in this perpetual grift mode. I can't grow the flowers myself, but I'm going to pick all the ones I can get because the other ones are coming in here too. So let's wreck this place. But at least I get something. I get my stash. This is also a khanate operation method. This is how they enrich themselves. The Silk Road was a very important and very wealthy place for very obvious reasons. And it became so impassable at some point that the naval routes took over precedence. People just avoided the area. But okay, yeah, you can avoid areas, you can avoid problems, but that doesn't mean the problems aren't going to start looking for you at some point if you don't address them properly. Certainly, it wasn't addressed properly by the European or Russian factors. And of course, there's different theories why that happened. But ultimately, it was more or less the Russians' responsibility, but they failed. The Tsar failed. And that is a fascinating historical landscape, the failure of the Tsar. It was very significant for Europe. And you could think about it this way. Yeah, they were out in the sticks. They didn't know what was really on the other end of the continent. They weren't really well informed. And they were exposed. So it was one of the most exposed extensions of Western civilization. And so they got rolled over and vassalized. And that's why their lives are filled with sadism and masochism to this day. And it's not coming from them necessarily. These political forces are still in play. But of course, it doesn't behoove anyone to claim the responsibility for that. So it's been subsumed to just criminal theory. Who are they? You know, could you find out? Is it possible to figure it out? Well, that's I guess you could say a historian's task, or perhaps the task of a criminologist, historical criminologist. It'd be interesting, very interesting to unravel that that knot of influence in our day. But to come back to the practicality of what we're dealing with now. So if you do go to the history and you look at the Czech Republic, where you had amazingly talented people that were subjected to these inverted, despotic, ideological frameworks, yeah, they didn't have the cushy jobs, okay? So forget about getting a cushy job. That is, the corporate culture is basically, if it's woke, it's broke. And even if they claim, like, they're going to try to distance themselves. I mean, even now, it's such a horrific a measure on every level, and that leads to disaster. I mean, people are trying to distance themselves. Like, no, I wasn't that. I wasn't part of the cultural revolution that caused all of this mayhem. And again, but are we there yet? Look, the Cultural Revolution that these types of theoreticians, Leninist theoreticians, pulled off in China, that's another place. Millions and millions and millions had to die before they even decided to make some changes, and they only did it because they began to get worried about what potential consequences could be. But ultimately, they thought that it was a success because it got a lot of they got a lot of polished torpedoes out of it. They carried on for decades afterwards. I mean, these were convinced people. The leadership leading up to Xi Jinping, the aggressor, right? They had a lot of people that in between there, that their nomenclatura that were 120% committed to their version of wokeism, just in nationalistic terms. And they like doing it, like just like we see woke people like doing it. Like they like calling people out for not being woke. They like to publicly denigrate them, and to win brownie, to virtue signal with that, amongst again their peers, that and to push the radicalization even further. The dogma, to solidify the dogma. No, we're in the 5% of string pullers here, with or without meritocracy. See, that's the thing. Why do they hate meritocracy? Meritocracy would throw these people on the dustbin, and they know it. They absolutely do. That's why they hate it, because it's alternative reality. In this system, they're the top. They're the fat, sterile broad at 50, bobbing her head and making the explanations for a foreign invasion being a good thing. And probably not just a millionaire, but on her way to being a billionaire. Because again, she's just the mouthpiece, a proxy for banks that are black boxes at this point. So what do you think that is? That's not a billionaire game. That's trillions. So for people that are in the digit game, that really like those digits, like being able to move trillions, they'll put somebody like that where she is and keep her there no matter what. That is, unless she gets beamed with some rotten vegetables, but that's just part of the job description. It's not like there's not more where she came from. That's the other thing. These ideological dogmatists, they're expendable. They don't matter as much as they think they do, believe it or not. But they are put there to make you believe that they're the ones responsible for what is, in essence, a nepotistic, global, criminal regime. So, that's the other thing. Like, they're not into like explaining themselves. They're not into certainly. They'll argue on moralizing grounds, but they're only using the inverted principles of exterminationism in some degree. But again, all of them know, all of the puppets know, and see, this is the thing. Like in a karabuki theater, the puppets are made of wood, but no, these are white monks. They know that if they're not ideologically conformist, that they will be canceled because they've internalized those rules. So that's why they're always on the Overton window sliding to more radicalism. That you'd think they would have a backbone or a spine. No, they're imposters. They have that position because they toe the line. And they probably have, like if you looked in their closet, there's all types of skeletons of extremely talented people, extremely ethical people, that they stepped on or betrayed or saw get canned. And that bothers them maybe on some level, but finally they feel themselves and their cowardly behavior to be on at least materially justified. So, and again, because they've been given a little bit of wiggle room on whether there's a God or whether, religion is good or this or that, or perhaps I'll just choose atheism because it's self-serving. And, well, who knows anyway, they're going to play those games with themselves until they kick it. The sooner the better, but, good things don't necessarily happen to bad people. I don't know if I could ever recommend this novel. Actually, I won't recommend this novel. It's The Scarlet Letter from Nathaniel Hawthorne. It's really sort of a weird drama that involves a lot of weird Protestantism in USA. Like, this was a big deal. Like, the whole Salem witch trial thing was a big deal. I mean, I read it as a young person. I was even questioned, like, what was the significance of this and whatnot. I mean, looking back, it was such a forgettable piece of work. I like Hawthorne's biography. I like that he worked in the customs house. I like the customs house. I mean, that has also a lot of historical significance because he was showing, look, he was one of the people in the customs house collecting customs, and that was it. That was the tax of the new nation of Jacobins that also had a Puritan background. Now, the Puritanism is, Perhaps, look, I'm not, a lot of snobs will just write them off entirely. I mean, just look at how they dress themselves, that black and white vibe, which is really annoying. Had the conical hats with the belt buckle on it. I mean, they had that like weird, they had a hipster look to them in their time, but it was ideological because it was Protestant, which meant they read the Bible, so they're privy to revelations. This is actually the stupid idea of Luther, that okay, via the printing press you get the public access and translations from Latin into modern languages of the Bible. Well, that automatically is supposed to make you some priest or person of spiritual insight, or perhaps if women are reading it too, everybody's reading it because it's the moral thing to do, then all of them know, better than the people who aren't in the know because they didn't read it. And yet the translations, like the King James, has anyone had a King James Bible? All those translations are crappy. And I'm sure they were crappy then, and they certainly weren't necessarily totally understood by the reading public. Like, you need to have serious linguistic training to even understand what's being said. The Bible is a highly complex piece of literature. It's that they have all the different types of stories, like the story of Job that was taken from Buddhists, the Therapeutae. Then you got the Book of Proverbs that was taken from the ancient Egyptians. Okay, and then you've got Greek, Latin, right, and Aramaic. So, there's a lot of incongruency. Then you got the Orthodox, you got the Romans, then you got Constantine. There's the level of complexity is high, and yet in modern times, at that time, as the printing press made things modern because you could transmit ideas, also stupid ones, including stupid translations from the Latin or what have you. Now, his translation is considered like authoritatively good, but it isn't the best. But in any case, this idea, the presupposition of these vain, I guess, middle class, whatever they were, that wanted to usurp the clergy, started reading the Bible themselves and coming up with their own damn ideas about it. Thank you very much. And they didn't like being bossed around because they were little lords in their own way, because they made themselves somehow significant in the economic chain of infinite progression, right? Which they sort of bled into materialism to suit their vanity. And so just think of the absurdity of that idea, the pugnaciousness of that idea, the audacity of that idea. Oh, I read the Bible, so I'm a moral person. I know, the doctrine and dogma. I don't need a priest. I don't need a bishop. I don't need, a hierarchy of people to tell me. Maybe there were reasons for that. Because, of course, religion, especially the Christian religion, was always political from day one. Even if you go to Paul in Ephesus, which I really think that's a city you should revisit architecturally, and then certainly take the history into account that far precedes the whole Christian thing, like by thousands of years. I think that's a really important thing. And then try to see it in sort of like, humanistic terms. Like, what were they trying to do again? They're coming into a city like Ephesus and telling everybody, the great news that they cooked up amongst themselves, like what salvation means and all that. Now, again, like that, I'm not saying they didn't change the world for the better in some way or another, but if you look at it from a humanistic, scientific type of detached perspective, what the hell did they bring to the world with their new insights? Really? Maybe there were some rubes on the coast that were really taken in with that. Maybe Rome was, the plebs and all that. They were really pretty impressed with the whole emotive story and everything else. And again, like the Therapeutae, which is the book of Job, that has inherent value. It helps people get through hard times. It's not like it's garbage. It's not. So you see, it's a lot of the human problem in the religious problem. The religious problem is a human problem. All these damn humans trying to vie for some type of social status via religious means. I know things better than you, or you want to try this trick on me. And look, have compassion on them. They were coming out of the 30 Years' War. This was a horrible war. 1/3 of Europe, they claim, died during this time. 1/3, 1 out of 3. Imagine that. And we're not saying it's not just confined to Germany. It's Poland, it's Sweden, it's the entirety of Europe. A gigantic war based on really, we say religious, but just think of it in ideological terms. We're the people, we read the Bible, we know better than you do what's in there. And then the Catholics say, no, you don't know Latin, you're not part of the hierarchy, you don't know what's up. So we have the moral authority. You don't. And then the other said, no, we read it quite precisely. We have the moral authority. We're more advanced. This is what it boils down to. So it really would be a shame to stay in that area instead of going to the worldly aims that worldly leaders use to conduct their elite politics, which aren't really explainable in religious terms, wouldn't you say? Like, murdering hundreds of thousands of peasants for what? Just wanting to displace their elders. They didn't want to wait till they were, 60 or 50, which they might not have lived to because, back in the Middle Ages, life expectancy wasn't thought to be as guaranteed. They wanted to get rid of the older orders that were lording it over them. So they came up with some radical ideas to eject them from the top. It's Huguenots. And you can get into the extremities of those different situations, and it becomes highly complex. And so even trying to understand it from our time right now, it's extremely difficult. But finally, if you take the more abstract, high-level view, it was divisory. And again, was it an evolution? Yes or no? I mean, in a certain sense, it was. But the use for just, let's say, religious, anti-rational ideas to be the inception of social movements, this has also been abstracted by Leninist factions. And they just create these types of social viruses for divisionary purposes, agitatory, propagandistic, divisionary purposes, which have military aims, which is the total annihilation of a counterparty that is opposed to them. Because they don't have the moral qualms that a normal person would have, because they've been educated by the hijackers of their own cultural institutions and radicalized along those lines, they don't have any qualms about using immoral, what we would think to be immoral methods to achieve exterminationist ends, which is also inconceivable for a moral person. So they've used that blind spot. Like, you wouldn't think of it, but, we would. So what would we do if we wanted to do that? Well, we would do this, 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 and this. We would tell you, it's a good thing to off yourself because you're standing in the way of progress. You see how Cultural Revolution used that? It's the same model, it's the same astroturf. Just as an addendum, because I don't want to end it on a note like that, it's coming back to Menendez. First off, his cover story, he was of Cuban extraction. Right there, that should have set off all the alarm bells. Cubans, they're living in some type of parallel world. And it's not as simple as you think. So they, just like the Conservative Party turned out not to be conservative, Cubans that turned up and pretended to be conservative aren't really conservative at the end of the day. They're Leninists and they're deep cover people. And they're machinations and also the damages they've caused. Menendez, he's put him in a history textbook and make him an example of one of the worst examples of that in this century, 21st century, worst example to date. But he's of a make and model, so you need to review these Cubans. You need to review Caribbeans. You need to review South Americans. You need to review Ottomans. You need to review Russians and Eastern Europeans of all different types of extractions. Because there's the Leninist variety and then there's the nationalist variety. And they don't really mix. So, but if you're mixing with the Leninist variety that's pretending to be conservative, you're in the wrong group. You've probably, the likelihood you've been played is probably 85% or higher. Oh, here we washed up on shore in a barrel. Of course we love freedom, democracy, and the American way. Yeah, it was just a story. Just like these damn Russians in London that showed up with all that money. Oh yeah, we love the British culture and way of life. That's why they paid off all the people and made sure that the little boats didn't get stopped. Sure, they loved the UK. Sure, they did. They laundered all that money for them. And meantime, they were stabbing them all in the back, undermining everything the country stood for. So yeah, sure, they loved it. They love USA too. Especially Cubans like Menendez. That's a profit model. All in Las Vegas, not just New Jersey, Las Vegas, New York, wherever the hell they are. How did they get in the country? Oh, they had a cover story. Yeah, we swam. They had a sob story. That's why they're such great Democrats, aren't they? Like they're just such great people. I mean, even if they had like showed up in a barrel, like in Lisbon, and carried out that type of political racket, even in there they wouldn't have been very well received. But because Americans are gullible and naive, they just eat these stories up. So yeah, do a full review. Who is in your network again? Who's following you on Facebook? Who are you following? You need to stop all that nonsense. And again, I'm coming back to big tech. Big tech is messed up. You're on these platforms, look to open source alternatives. Now again, you could get roped. You need to bring some caution to the game, but maybe you can also learn how to run your own server. Be a little bit more independent and less of a follower. Because there's a lot of bad games being played at this point in time. On purpose. Because it's effective and it's cheap, and that's why they decide to do it. So you're involved in that in any way, you need to do a full review, full revision, contact stories, whatever. Because these people, their cover's blown. So use it to your advantage. Wake up, wash the crap off your butt that's sticking there. Take the diaper off, ditch it. Because the way this thing is shaping up before World War III, the whole areas are going to be reconsidered. Like the entire Caribbean is going to be reconsidered. You know, entire South America, entire Indo-Pacific, all of Africa, especially North Africa. Everything's going to be reconsidered. This roll of the dice. And here's the thing, they rolled the dice. You didn't roll it, they rolled it. So now it's just the inevitable consequence of that. It's the shakeout of that. So you want to lose on that dice roll? I don't think so. So yeah, Menendez, boy, who were his donors? Like, do a little bit more. Be a little bit more inclusive, as they say. Everything about him. Who was he? What photos exist where he's talking to somebody? Who are his friends? Like, you know, who was he really working well with in different committees? Like, all of that taints them, and it should. Use it to the full extent, because he really did blow it. And guess what? He was in more than 10 years. Coming back to the negatively selected 5% of henchmen for the that comprise the nascent totalitarian class, realize they are negatively selected. So that means these are people that are not concerned by moral considerations. So the psychopathy is high amongst them. They're also from groups that wouldn't necessarily be at the top of the social hierarchy, but would rather be at the bottom. Again, these are deviant subgroups, also non-native populations, and women. Women are, there's a lot of great women, there's also a lot of horrible women. And there's a lot of horribly smart women, right? A combination of the two. That's a demographic that is almost overrepresented in the totalitarian 5% of henchmen. See, again, they're disposable. You know, they're the substitutionist of a decapitated system. They have to be they're the filler in a decapitated social hierarchy, but it's a privileged position. So of course, so they have they know, like these are not stupid people in many cases. Again, these are just the weirdly selected, smart, otherwise socially peripheral members of any population. Now the main thing is that they can communicate. So this is why they go in for polished appearances. So they wear, as you know, suits and fashion, and anything that has to do with imposterism is very high up on their list of skills. Then, so you have to take this garbage, more or less, the lowest garbage, the most talented of the lowest garbage, and polish them up. You know, like My Fair Lady type of mechanism. So they polish these turds, if you want to put it that way. That's a nice way, a nice colloquialism. And then they're the mouthpieces for the it's financial totalitarians. Now, this was an idea that came from John Stuart Mill. So it's a type of it's a technicality. It's a totalitarianism based on a technicality, which materialists have just limited to financial standing. And it makes sense on a certain level. If you're slaving away for a mortgage, you're an enslaved class without the old-fashioned accoutrements of slavery, such as chains and whips and what have you, social standing and financial leverage, or your idea of social standing and financial leverage, or your idea of social responsibilities that keep you psychologically invested in a way of life. And you have to look how many, a 5-day work week, man, that is a lot of work you are doing, coming and going. You're committed to some type of system, which they call civilized, which is in fact financial totalitarianism. You don't have any time for yourself. It's very little. You might have a little bit of time for some entertainment, like watching sports on TV, drinking beer, right? That's what you got time for. But anything else, like uh, in-depth study of archaeology or mathematics or different types of teas and perhaps the cultivation of tea or cultivating bonsais all the way down the line. You don't have time for that. You don't have the peace of mind for that. You're just getting ready for Monday, more or less, in their system. So, of course, the expendable, despicable henchmen of the financial totalitarians that have been selected to be just that, they're very attuned to what the slaves hear or don't hear, or what they should hear, or what they shouldn't hear, or what they should think, or what they shouldn't think. Sort of the old KGB model. And again, the stupid Western perception of KGB was that it was just spying agents that they were trying to figure out. And that was part of it. But the other part of it was all the social sciences, all the humanities, everything that belongs to a culture that they destroyed, subverted, inverted. So now you also have to think of the function. So in the social sciences, think about that. So you're talking about malign social scientists, malign journalists, malign social theorists, who have for financial reasons made the decisions because they don't have the morality. They didn't have the morality to hinder them from making such a horrible decision, not just for themselves, but for everyone else. But certainly there's a discrepancy between what they think is horrible, what you think is horrible, because they have sinecures, right? They're tenured. You're just, scrambling around on a no contract, and if you try to get into one of their corporations that they own and which they've inverted the corporate culture of, then you best abide by Buddhism or whatever else, whatever other indignity they've thought up that week, because it's a compliance test. Don't comply, you get fired. Then guess what? Your compliance test is sleeping on a park bench with drugged out zombies and whatever other mayhem they can organize in sadistically planned and architected zones for non-financially compliant people. Because let me tell you, if everyone owns their own home, or they have intact families that they could go to if they got fired from one of these plantations, then it wouldn't be all that terrifying. But they want there to be that level of terror that's palpable and real, because they just went outside and saw some old lady get stabbed to death. That it's compelling enough to be sadistically abused in their institutions that are financially controlled by financial totalitarianism. So don't underestimate the henchmen. The henchmen are these so what do you call them, sociologists? Pure evil. But not evil in the sense you think, just pure badness. And they have no qualms about that. But how do you notice them? Well, you need to take them apart on a bunch of different levels. First off, they are listening to you. Like they're listening to you, but listening with the intent of how can I undermine whatever it is that they're saying. How can I discredit them? How can I create polarization? How can I find the controversial parts or parts that are off-putting, and then how can I magnify those and make them look ridiculous? So they're really into listening, nitpicking, and finding sort of the wrong things. Or I'm going to find a book from the 1958 that maybe pioneered a theory but has long since been forgotten. But they'll dig that one up and then say that this is the defining work of some type of movement, and because it said this and this in this chapter, this one part where it was weakest, but the other stuff is spot on, they're going to say, well, because it had this, the rest is not. It is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous idea. Ridiculous people. So they have this. They want to maintain the appearance that they're above the thing that they're criticizing, when they're not. The other thing they want to appear to be is impartial, which they're not. They're more or less politically committed ideologues. They're dogmatic ideologues, but part of their dogmatic idealism is to criticize, to find or identify their opponents, which is the opponents of totalitarianism, figure out their positions, find the weakest points, and go after those, and mischaracterize that as the thing that should be disregarded. But again, what they're really trying to do is to get you on their side with these, again, sort of, it's like tips for bullies. They'll give a cheat sheet to their little bullies who are generally below average intelligence and also have social animosity. They give them these cheat sheets. So, okay, so here, if you have this cheat sheet, when somebody brings up like an 800-page book written by a Harvard psychologist or something like that, then you're just going to have these 1, 2, 3 things that you can turn the thing into some type of dispute. And again, that's a political decision. That's a political result. That's a political method. That has nothing to do with coming to some type of scientific conclusions. But again, the scientific conclusions are not something that works for their leveraging scheme, for example. It could just be something like that. It's ancillarily damaging to a leveraging scheme that's needed for financial terrorism, or they thought was needed for financial terrorism. And so, then they put that into their psychopathic algorithm. So wait, this thing does not benefit me. Is it good or bad? Well, it comes out bad. But what's bad for them might be good for society. What do you think? What do the results say? Well, then science is bad. The science that says that your experiment comes up with a conclusion that is not in our interest, then the science is bad. The people doing the science is bad. Whatever they can find to throw a monkey wrench in it, they will. And again, they'll go, alternative history is one of them. Politicized history is one of them. Psychological, emotive techniques like carefully worded vocabulary, like they stick to a vocabulary trying to infer that you should stick to the same vocabulary because it's de facto legitimate, because they're using it, because they're from academia. But the funny thing is like they don't, when they're in this criticism mode, which is more or less a rhetorical process, it's a political process. Again, their butt is on the line. This is their job. They're this type of henchman, so this is why they have a privileged position in the totalitarianism of neo-Leninism. So that's what they do, but they don't really have any ideas. The end net effect of their like smarmy, sarcastic, intonating that they know better, and pseudo intellectual connection with groups they know don't really have a lot of commonality with them, but they want to appear to have some type of commonality, some type of Leninist anti-moral revolutionary commonality of humanity, which is highly abstract and not real on any level except an agitory one that connects to their emotions. Because you can make them angry by saying words. You just need to say a word. People get angry, yes, and then you attribute that anger. These people, your natural leaders, the ones that wouldn't be eating out of a trash can or running around like a madman, doing ridiculous things for a ridiculous mortgage. These men are historical enemies, and this is the book. These are the books you need to read. Because again, divide and conquer. You have a divisive society. You have people not liking each other, not just on a tribal level, but they have all different types of levels. Now they have the ideological level. It's ideological compliance. Before they called it communism. Now it's wokery. Not woke enough. No, there's going to be some problems. Young people turning young people against older people. Oh, these are just old-headed people that don't know nothing. Like, this is what the boomer whole thing was. That was what was behind that. It was a age. It's easy to sometimes clown the older generations, but it's not a wise thing to do, and it's certainly not a good indication that they're going to do any better for themselves when they're missing that most basic connection with their own people and culture. So again, I think you're at the top of financial totalitarianism. You don't care about the people that are, digiting for you. So, but they do care about political movements that could remove their monopoly. Just think in terms, again, these whacked out, crazy billionaires. Another one that came out was Murdoch. He's an info bubble, international info bubble, totalitarianistic, criminalistic type of dude. He's now passing it off as like a family legacy. Really strange, wouldn't you say? It said he covered for the Tories and what they became the last 13 years. No, absolutely. Then that's why Australia's so messed up. New Zealand's wacky. Canada's messed up. They think he's certainly a key player in the demise of Western political institutions. Certainly, who would say that that's overreach? Who would say that? Well, you'll find white monkeys that will stand up and say, no, you're seeing things wrong. He's one of the best people on earth. What are you talking about? Then if you don't go along with that, they could get meaner. Say, oh, you insulted this person. There's laws against that, libel laws, Here's what? Ding dong. Who's this? Oh, it's UPS. What do I got? Oh, it's a 100-page libel suit sent by some polished chrome torpedo lawyers law firm. Oh dear, what do I do now? So don't think that's happened. I'm sure there would be some way you could go back in time and find those cases and then the people connected with those cases, and that right there would be ipso facto a smoking gun for a type of illicit crime that hasn't really adequately been categorized yet, but most likely will in future civil societies. So this is the other thing, these social movements and whatnot and the ideological conformity, just remember, these financial totalitarians, they need you, you don't need them. That's the point. It's a parasitic relationship. They know it. You might not. You might see some of the benefits of being able to live in a culture that your ancestors created, not financial totalitarians. Not for global ideas that aren't quite well thought out. But to come back to one of their specific points, they were against this whole, they called it IQ fetishism. I agree with that. People that are overly invested in IQ are wrong. This is another digit game. It's not IQ necessarily. IQ is a part of it, certainly. And certainly all the programs that were totalitarian in nature, Leninist in nature, that were put into effect in the 60s and 70s and beyond, they weren't put there for the benefit of the societies they were put into. They were put in there for the reason of disunity, divide and conquer. So it makes sense from their perspective, which is why they politically back it. And then not just politically back it, they have to attack the opposition, which is the healthy members of any society, the people that don't want divisory and exterminationist policies in their countries, but that they become the enemy once you set up these false positions, these divisive positions that were put up specifically for the purpose of doing that, attacking the normal majority. So, but yeah, fetishizing and globalizing IQ, that is very myopic and stupid. It's not just a numbers game. Even now we have machines that can answer us almost any question, but that's not a holistic concept for living. And being consumed by aggravating things all the time, or even like 80% of the time, that wasn't the case in the Middle Ages. So we've regressed under these systems to a form of slavery, cognitive slavery. Again, the people that are at the top of these systems, they don't want to hear any of that. There's a lot more. They also don't want any type of mobilization. It came from on any type of political fronts. They just want to keep things decapitated, with them at the top and their minions below them. That, of course, are according to the psychopathic principles that they all know and live by. They know how expendable they are. They're entirely dependent on their position. From their paymasters. And they've really gotten into their way of thinking. And they really don't have a problem with that. But what they do have a problem is people putting two and two together. And coming together and not having stupid, divisive conversations and situations. So they're constantly working against that. Coming up with new narratives, new ways of presenting things, putting a new salt in old and new wounds, pricking the pride of certain demographics, saying words like domination. They want to dominate you. They would always look for these emotional push button words. Watch yourself listening to them and then hearing these push button words, and then watch how that affects you in some way. That's the manipulative side of what they're doing. And they're doing it, again, for their agenda, their position, their privilege. Because they're also all in on power politics, so everything is power politics now. You say a joke, 10 people laugh, but it could be seen in some abstract political lens. You're a bad person. You should be thrown out of the group. What? Where did this social dynamics come from? Well, it came from, yeah, the worst segment, and the worst segment has no problem with totalitarianism. That's their bread and butter, so to speak. That's their class. Like you're a baker, you're baking bread. They're coming up with new totalitarian methods and ways and means and um, regulations, ideas. So it is what it is. We didn't. I did not pick this time specific. As far as I know, I did not pick this time to be born in. What a strange time it is too. Very strange. But look, the 15th century was strange. The 14th century was strange, and it just keeps getting stranger the further back you go. So, and people still did manage to live, and some people managed to flourish despite all of the ridiculousness. I mean, in a way, the financial totalitarianism is a substitute for the totalitarianism of nature itself, of out of controlness itself. You know, when a meteor strikes, there's no debates about that. Can't say, "Hey, Mr. Meteor, would you please come to our council? We want to discuss this. Can we have a democracy about this?" So, can I go back in a time machine and stop World War I from happening? Is that possible? Can I do that? Oh no. Oh, okay. I guess I'm stuck with this causality then that we have today. Isn't that grand, or maybe not so grand? So, but again, how do you recognize them? They're always attacking. Always attack, criticize, dissect, slice and dice, slice and dice, slice and dice. And then push towards the ideological frame. Also put your enemies, in a poison frame. I believe that was the term I was looking for. They like poison the frame, like, suspect the motives of this non-class affiliated person that's saying so many interesting and persuasive things. Suspect the motives. This person is not part of the totalitarian class, so nothing they say or do can be good unless it's on narrative. And this man is certainly off narrative. He's discussing us. How we've turned into a grotesque blob. How we've recongealed. And this brings me also back to Russia. Look, Russia, the Soviet Union, it was a transparent fraud in 1991. Transparent. It means everybody in the Soviet Union knew it. The people in Russia knew it. The politicians knew it. It was internationally known. So they did so many things broke down. They came up. They had to come up with something new. So they came up, not because they wanted to, but because they had to, with this whole, we collapsed, and now that's gone, and this is the new thing. But oddly enough, Putin comes out of the institution that created and maintained that fiasco the entire time. So it was just fakery. It was a fake ploy of repackaging of the same thing. So, but this time they think, this passive repackaging was the mistake we made. We should have gone militarily forward with our wrong ideas, which are basically, it's a wrong way of treating people and their populations, their society, and their culture. So this is the other thing. There's a disconnect between the different tentacles of totalitarianism. They have these attackers and wig flippers and academicians and privileged bottom 5%ers that again are smart, usually at least on a cunning level, with again no morals and no remorse for the objectively horrible things that they do. Like they're disconnected. They're living in denial. That's how I put it. Some of them. Others are just detached from feeling, not in the way you think. So this is psychopathy. Everyone's throwing this word around. No, true psychopath, it doesn't affect them at all. Like they don't have any response to what would otherwise be horrible to a normal person. Now again, this is useful in a society that's managed in normal ways. When these people gain too much influence, bad things start happening, and they don't have any feedback loop that would limit them from doing that. And so they make bad things worse or just don't react appropriately. Like if you, again, you're holding on to a burning rock, but you don't feel that, you'll hold on to it till it burns through your skin, perhaps even your hand, and then you've got a much worse injury than had you just had the normal reaction of dropping the rock as soon as it got too hot. But again, they think this is a strength. They can hold on to that rock. I don't feel nothing. And again, the causality, the badness isn't as apparent to them in the moment or in the weeks or in the months or years of their lives when they're holding on to these toxic ideas. So that's where I would also differentiate cunning from true intelligence. Cunning is an intelligence that also has delusion mixed in with it, which makes it cunning and not intelligent. There's a difference, there's a gray scale, and it's hard to catch. So, and then just think of the consequences. You just imagine your eye has, so on the surface of it, you can't see it, but you're looking through, and it's just making everything look 3 meters to the right. So you're shooting your arrow, what looks to be dead spot on, but you're missing 3 meters every time, and you don't acknowledge that there's something with your eye. That's what delusion can do in terms of performance. Also aggravation. Just imagine how aggravating that is. Now some people might correct with their delusion, right? they'll learn to overcorrect. And then if they do that, they live in a state of cognitive dissonance. Everyone's telling them they should be aiming this way, but every time they aim that way, they miss by 3 meters. So they do some type of adaptation without really realizing what is in play or taking any corrective measures on a physical or psychological level. Which you could say could lead to incorrigibility, which is also a form of partisanship. So again, what they do is again just trying to discredit anything that opposes them, their position of privilege and power. Because again, the pot loves calling the kettle black. You're about power, you're about authority, you're about this shadowic projection. No, it's that you're imputing these motives that do not apply. But again, the net effect on a political level is that it has rhetorical value because it connects emotively with subnormal audiences or just normal audiences. Oh, this term, this way of framing, this makes me feel aggressive. I really feel it. This must be me. This must be the right thing. And unfortunately, large segments of the population are just normally stuck in those ways of existing, and there's really nothing that any intellectual or God or priest or monk can do about that, except acknowledge when it's happening, to have the basic integrity to acknowledge what's happening and not take a politically motivated position on things. So it's frightening. Also, again, what was their opposition? Well, back in the day it was conservative, so what did they all do? They just repackaged themselves, conservatism, got rid of real conservatism. Now, you want to be conservative, you have to listen to them, because they're the conservatives. That's the political sleight of hand that is essentially totalitarian. So it'd be like, communists saying, oh, you want democracy? Okay, we're the Democrat. Here's the new Democrats that happen to be communists. They use some rhetorical flourishes. They say they support democracy, and it's the new communists. But that's something, again, only political scientists would be able to correlate one-to-one. Populists, oh, this is the new thing? What is this? This is the new taco? Oh. So it looks like the old taco. No, it's marketed this way now. Oh, okay, so I gotta ask for this instead of that? Yeah, that's right. that other one, that was the bad one. This is the good one. Something like, you could have unlimited, there could be unlimited comedic situations that can arise from these types of ridiculous games, cynical and also sadistic games. So, but I think I could go on about kings versus these financial types and whatnot, and venerable institutions and venerable families versus these institutions and all of that, but there's really no point in getting into that all that much when we're still stuck in this modern context of pseudo-intellectuals. That's what basically they are. So they're established pseudo-intellectuals that attack real scientists. That's from the social scientist ideological perspective. So yeah, it's shocking, it's disturbing, but again, once you accept imposterism and then you accept the way they have been appointed, the Leninistic mechanisms behind them that they deny exist, that they would rather attack the concept of meritocracy than to entertain it instead, or discredit it with a bunch of boogeyman nonsense like, oh well, this was thought to be meritocracy in 1700, so the whole concept, throw it out. But that is one that gets under their skin. Like meritocracy, that's sort of one of the chief things that discredits them, that destabilizes them, because it's true. They're not part of a meritocracy. They're part of totalitarianism. But they got the power, so they should be able to decide these issues. Gosh darn it. Everybody should, the interest rates went up. Everybody needs to get back to work. What's going on here? Just forget about these ideas, That's how they roll. That's how they roll at the end. Once they get, but meritocracy, what? Hey, that means questioning what we're doing here. We've created such a marvelous society. Why would anyone question that? Especially me. I'm the 5% whip cracking class, inverted wig flip class. So what? You want to challenge that? You're against me. You're bad. You're trying to take away what I got. Like that. This is the also level of childishness that they have. But they were not meant to be reasonable. They were meant to be like a form of intellectual management, right? Cognitive managers. Wait, this idea? No. This leads to us being discredited. So this idea is discredited. The people who say these ideas are discredited. Remove these heretics. And that's also something, come back to these wokesters, man. They look like wonky, wacky neo pilgrims, you know. Again, with the black and white conical hats. That's the way to think of these people. Just curmudgeonly, stuck on materialism, number schemes, oh yeah, instead of the Christianity, they just junk that part. It's now just nihilism. Then you're really the type of Puritan that they like having around as a curmudgeonly slave that knows his cognitive place, doesn't question the super ideas and decisions these neo-Leninists make. As manifestly absurd as they are or not, it's about conformity that matters. So that's our in group. So you're not in that in group. You're out group. You're not going to be in the 5% of successful people and the 95% goosed and ganked and defeathered social hierarchy, where there's no mobility other than social mobility other than conformity. So yeah, just realize that's what happened to institutions. They did. They need a complete overhaul, not gradual. See, this brings me also back to Russia, 1991. Yeah, that's how it happens. This thing breaks down, and you need new people in it. Now the problem is with that process is the new people that needed to come in didn't come in, and the old people got in again, rebranded themselves. And now we're dealing with that can being kicked down 3 decades. We got the 30 years of banditry behind us now, and a gigantic war going on that could also spread. So is that a desired outcome? For who is that a desired outcome? When under better management, things could be looking completely different. Just unimaginably different from our current time, but I have a feeling that there's some people who could have imagined quite a different future, and I don't think that future was as impossible as they like to have us believe.